In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, thank you for joining me in this briefing. An Afghan delegation, including the Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Abdullah, will be joining me to leave for the United States tonight. And we're looking very much forward to discussions with President Obama, with members of the cabinet, and I've been accorded the rare privilege to address a joint session of Congress on the 25th. So I'll be doing that. Some of our key messages I'll share with you, and then I'll take 5 questions and answer them all together. Our first message is thank you. Over 2,000 American servicemen and women have died in Afghanistan, paid the ultimate sacrifice. Over 20,000 have been wounded in action. Close to, if you count repeated deployments, 1 million American servicemen and women have seen service in Afghanistan. It's an immense sacrifice, both in blood and in treasure. And the people of Afghanistan and the government both want to acknowledge and wish well to the wounded and pray for those that have departed us. There's been a legacy of this immense effort. That legacy is the Afghan National Security Force. When the bond process started, we hardly had anyone in uniform. There was no security infrastructure in the country. There were barely chairs and desks in our security organizations. Today, we have an infrastructure. Our special forces are second to none on any standard. And the Afghan soldier, policeman, and Secret Service is demonstrated determination in defending this country. This is not to say that all is fine. It is not. We face challenges. There's a challenge, fundamental challenge of management of our resources. Systems, processes, procedures that would ensure sustainability or at issue. I've retired 62 generals in the Afghan National Army since assuming office. We're systematically reviewing command and control structure, procedures, and approaches. Second, the management of resources will be civilianized. Contracts have already been centralized. A contract where there are allegations of differences of $211 million has been suspended. There's a full investigation underway. And a new contracting system has been put in place where we want to make sure that resources, both ours and that of our partners, are put to proper use. We're contributing $750 million of our own resources to the Afghan National Security Force. And of course, each dollar of this means that a dollar is not spent on public health or education or related issues. So the efficiency of the money both international and Afghan, is a prime concern. The question that would be asked of us, and you're going to be asking it, is fiscal sustainability. Will we be able to afford our armed forces? And this is precisely why we're examining the system of expenditure, the efficiencies, the effectiveness, the transparency, from top to bottom. That's one part of the problem, of the question. The other part of the question is facing the economic situation and generating resources that would underwrite the government for the long term. I'll come back to that. The second issue is the nature of the threats. But before I go to the threats, I want to make one thing clear. The heinous attack on the woman around Shad Shamshir Mosque has no place in a country like ours. I've issued the strongest communique condemning it, and there will be a full investigation. We are not going to allow mob justice. Lynching in any form, shape is unacceptable. But it reveals a fundamental issue, and that is that almost 90% of the duties of the police today are focused on fighting, which is not their constitutional role, it is not their legal role, but it's an imposed war on them. Focusing on civilian capabilities, on enforcement of the rule of law, is key to us. But creation of a police force globally is much more difficult than an army. An army, by contrast, army is hard enough, but the police is really difficult because the police is the public face and the daily nature of interactions with them are important. Threats. I coined the term in the Munich Security Conference called the ecology of terror. And the reason for this is that terror is no longer an aberration. It's a system. Morally, it's an aberration. Sociologically, it's a system. If we do not recognize the phenomena, we will not be able to defeat it. And I'll indicate briefly three of its drivers. First, Pakistan's military operations in South and West Waziristan and now in Khyber are pushing a major series of global terrorist networks onto us. I call this the displacement effect. They're being displaced from one physical territory to another, but it has not resulted in the destruction of their networks. They're seeking alternative centers. Second, that's from the east. Second, from the west, Daesh is 4 phases that now have been very well documented. Organize, orient, decide, and act. The first 3 phases we were able to document because we were able to focus, and we did not allow them to go to phase 4. We focused earnestly on them. Daesh's characteristic is that it's like a man-eater. It swallows its competitors. What it did to the Syrian National Army is one example. It absorbed its most significant elements, but it swallowed the place. So here, it's not the physical presence of people from Syria in Iraq, it's the network effect, and that needs to be one. And the third driver is the criminal economy. The global criminal economy is around $1 trillion a year. We don't have accurate statistics, but I'm ashamed to say, but we need again sociologically to state the fact, Afghanistan's heroin production will be one of the 10 top contributors to this global criminal economy. And it is global. Billions, now probably in the last 13 years, trillions of dollars have evolved. And as a result, there are serious stakeholders in keeping the opium production and the heroin processing and trafficking in place. And that requires insecure spaces. You will be asking a question, the answer is quite simple. Am I asking the United States for a specific type of assistance? Am I asking for change of pipelines, for number of troops, etc.? No. What I'll be explaining to the Congress of the United States is what we are doing, how we're taking our destiny in our hands, how we value the partnership, how we are focusing on sustainability. Those decisions are not mine. They are up to the American people, to American Congress, and to the American government. Naturally, in any complex society making major commitments, there are differences of opinion, and each of those will be asked and debated in a free society. What we are underlining is both the nature of the threats and what we are doing with existing resources and capabilities. And I'm pleased to say that in the last 6 months, our security forces have exonerated themselves. A lot of people bet on a collapsing state. It has not happened. What do we expect in the security environment? A difficult spring. The winter has been extraordinarily difficult, and barring major breakthroughs in the region, the spring will be difficult. So our focus is to be prepared for that spring and to be able to deal with it and overcome. Your next question will probably be on the region. Am I reading you right thus far? I don't have any spies on you. I just read your articles. The next question is Pakistan. What's the fundamental definition of the problem? The definition of the problem has been that Pakistan and Afghanistan for the past 13 years have been in an undeclared state of hostilities. We've offered this definition. It has not been rejected by our counterparts. So our fundamental goal regarding peace is twofold. First, peace between states. The state of Pakistan, the state of Afghanistan must come to enduring peace. Then to normal relations, and then to cooperative relations. While easy to state the goal, the process is going to be time-consuming. Second, is peace with the Taliban within the framework of preserving the goals, the gains of the last 13 years. We want a political solution to that problem. What I can we have not held secret discussions. We're not going to have secret discussions. This is an open society. You cannot have covert discussions. I can share with you is that I'm cautiously optimistic in preparing the enabling grounds. I reviewed in a previous life over 100 peace agreements that were concluded in the 1990s, wrote a long article on it. Peace processes are not easy. They require strategic patience, and they require focus. We have consulted very widely, and all the consultations are in writing. The results of the consultation are encouraging because the space of consensus within Afghanistan is very large. But also the space. There are skepticisms, there are questions, there are serious doubts. A society that has lived 36 years in war is not going to suddenly have a moment of saying trust. Building trust is important, and in this regard. Regionally, our neighbors, I'm very pleased to report, from India to Azerbaijan, our first circle of neighbors, are engaging very actively with us. And you've seen that since formation of the Government of National Unity, we have not been waiting for others to come to us. We have taken the issue of regional partnership extremely seriously and have moved forward with it. Equally significant, our partnership with the United States, with Europe, with Japan, Canada, and Australia is on very solid footing. VTCs do wonders, and they have been very productive in this regard, as well as personal visits. And our outreach to the Arab Muslim world equally has been very productive. Domestically, your eternal question, when cabinet? Today. Today the cabinet will be completed and announced. When electoral reforms? Today the commission will be appointed. The Government of National Unity is a lasting phenomenon. It's a conscious decision to choose unity over division. And I'm very pleased with the nature of my partnership with Dr. Abdullah. We see each other at least 3 times a week for an hour each, and then as need be. 2 more remarks, and then I'll take your questions. One on rule of law, justice and rule of law. To frame all our issues, we are not in denial. Our inheritance is extraordinarily difficult. I've interviewed every single appellate court judge, all 34 of them. I've also interviewed every single judge of the Supreme Court, because we'll have to make appointments of 2 judges this year and 3 more next year. Our justice system is in serious need of an overhaul. Again, people, processes, procedures. One of the things that we've reached consensus and will be moving is to move property issues out of the courts. It's an aberration in the region that the court system deals with property rights. And 80% of our property rights are unsettled. They're not firm. The Office of Land 3 weeks ago, the cabinet has decided is going to be the key authority for dealing with this, and we are going to simplify the procedures and deal with it. But the court system and the Attorney General's office both require serious attention. Over 600 positions in the Attorney General's office are held by graduates of high school. And every single appellate judge has complained about the quality of work of the prosecutor. The human capital is one part of it, but the systems back in being able to. The other is the economy. We've completed a portfolio project review with every single one of our partners. Every single project that is funded from outside has been brought under systematic review. Every project that is funded by the Afghan government has also been reviewed. With the formation of the cabinet, we'll be moving to now tackle the economic issues in earnest. Today, if you Pashto and Persian-speaking colleagues share, I've addressed the farmers of this country with a New Year message, and it's a comprehensive program of reform in the agricultural sector and irrigation. We will have the mechanisms now to focus equally on subnational governance. We have serious issues in subnational governance, from municipalities to provinces to districts, but they will be addressed. Balance, last point. A hugely difficult inheritance, but equally a huge national determination to overcome it. We're not asking for charity, but we will be seeking a meaningful partnership where common interests and common approaches to use of resources and to sustainability of the efforts that are undertaken are going to be the focus of our attention. So thank you again for coming. Yes, please. BBC.
Mr. President, thank you very much for that. And could you talk a bit more about the future of US troops in Afghanistan? You say that in Washington you won't be demanding a change in the timeline or in the number of troops. I thought you already had. And would you like there to be a change in the timeline? Would you like the 10,000 or so who are here at the moment to remain through this year's fighting season?
Sune Rasmussen from The Guardian. As you probably read, one of my colleagues interviewed former President Karzai recently, and he not so indirectly criticized your policies with Pakistan and warned that Afghanistan should not be under the thumb of Pakistan. Do you have a comment on that?
Hi, I'm from the Wall Street Journal. You mentioned this upcoming fighting season. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on how you're seeing it shaped differently from past fighting seasons because of some of the groups that you mentioned? And whether you're worried that because of the emergence of these new ideologies, there could be more sectarian violence? Thank you.
Press. Oh, thank you. Mr. President, I know you mentioned that the peace process was to be transparent, open government, people will know what's going on, but I wonder if you can tell me if you've had, to date, any face-to-face meetings with any representatives of the Taliban, and if so, where and when and with whom? And if not, what is your timeline and what is your ongoing plan, time frame, time-wise, roadmap, whatever, for peace talks now, within the next few months, 2 years, however long it takes?
Let me take the Guardian's question first, and then I'll take those in sequence. Our policy, first of all, President Karzai said that Guardian broke the rules. I hope it's not the case, because they said that he was giving you a conversation that was off the record, and it was turned. That's between you and the president. It's not my issue. Afghanistan is not discussed any issues of dispute with Pakistan. We are not under anyone's thumb, and we never will be. This is a government that is focused consciously on creation of a regional compact on stability and prosperity. That is our goal. What France and Germany reached after World War II is our goal. We've reached out to every single one of our neighbors. As I said, from India to Azerbaijan is our critical focus. This is going to require overcoming the past. The past is very difficult. So because of it, naturally, there are emotions. But we don't operate on the basis of emotions. We operate on the basis of a plan. And the plan is to overcome the past, to move step by step, to move sequentially. What has changed from the time of President Karzai? The nature of the threats have changed. The Pakistani army, only at the end of President Karzai's term, engaged its insurgents. Now it's a daily occurrence. The consensus in Pakistan, as approved by its parliament to confront terror, is unprecedented. The Mecca Declaration is an unbelievable event in the Muslim world. I urge you to pay close attention to the Mecca Declaration. It's in this context that we are engaging with definition of threats that cannot be dealt with through national means alone. It's going to require national, regional, Arab Islamic, and global level coordination. We are carefully preparing the ground for 5 levels of action and interaction. For instance, we were able to create the first tripartite relationship anywhere in the world between China and the United States. We were the catalyst of this, and we're very proud of it. Some issues are going to be solved bilaterally, some trilaterally, some multilaterally. And this is our approach, so that we can move on this kaleidoscope flexibly and bring the pieces together. I briefed the president. That's President Karzai. He was my president, and I treat him as president. He is continuously briefed, and his views are always appreciated and taken into account. Fighting season. The nature of the war needs to be very carefully examined now, because of the confluence of these groups. One. Second, if you look at Daesh, if you compare Al-Qaeda and Daesh, it's like going from Windows 1 to Windows 5. The morphing of terrorism is something that we really need to focus on. This, you can see what my days are like, but I read very intensely on Syria and Iraq. Fortunately, I had a ground because I taught Middle Eastern studies for years. National horizon limits our purview. We need to understand that these threats of region, these groups do not fit within the framework of classic insurgencies. Their objective within countries is not to take over political power, which has been the historic pattern of the way COIN or counterinsurgency was formulated. Their first attempt is to destroy the state system as we've known it. Each time a state collapses in the area, it gives them another possibility. And 3, the financing is incredible. You know, I mean, when did we know of movements of opposition that controlled hundreds of billions of dollars? One needs to look into this phenomena. The techniques evolve. Because of it, one needs to be very clear about two things. One, legitimacy of use of force. Use of force has to be legitimate, being perceived, because again, one thing which is not changed is popular support. One has to focus on the people as the critical element. And second is the flexibility. Flexibility of response and coming to appreciate conditions and respond to those are very important. Associated Press, easy. We have not had face-to-face discussion. We're preparing the conditions for those. Once those conditions are in place, I'll be sitting here and explaining them to you. BBC, I appreciate. A partnership is about appreciation of conditions. I'm actually very grateful to President Obama that when he ordered the surge in Afghanistan, he put timelines. Without those timelines, we would have had to deal with a sudden security transition rather than a sequential one. As somebody who headed the security transition, it allowed me to really understand and to plan and frame, because the five-phase approach was mine, that both the Afghan government, then headed by President Karzai, and the American government accepted. Sequence requires predictability. To be able to move with sequence, one has to, and then it requires concentration. Between 2012 and 2014, the Afghan army fundamentally changed as a result of the investment that took place in it. So within this phase, again, we lost about 8 months of time because the bilateral security agreement and the status of force agreements were not signed. There was a lot of uncertainty. That uncertainty forced General Dunford, one of the most able soldier statesmen that I've known, to plan very rapid withdrawal, and decisions were made. We've operated with those. We've made up for those 8 months. But it meant that 70% of my time personally had to focus on security. Now, when I say it's a partnership, it means that one explains the conditions, one arrives at, the first point is to arrive at the definitions of the threats and the conditions on the ground through consensus. That is the crucial point of departure. You cannot just simply request assistance without end. It's not the way the world works. 2, one has to know that one has a plan of action. 3, that we own the problem and we are not shifting the problem to the shoulders of our partners. Because the bottom line is that the government of Afghanistan is responsible for the security of Afghanistan. So I'm not, again, I'm not fudging your question, but the issue of numbers is a very complicated domestic issue in the United States. We don't want to get into it. We will explain the condition, what we are doing, how we are bringing those efficiencies, and then we need to let the internal process take over and arrive at decisions that serves both our need, the regions, the global needs, and the security of the United States. This is the discussion we've had with partners. Our European partners have changed. I hope that you've noticed that in the past there was a perception that Europe was being asked as part of its global duties to engage in Afghanistan. Now Europe is engaging very willingly and European leaders have become very good advocates for us. We greatly appreciate this, but we need to respect the internal decision-making processes of our partners, and we will operate within those. And again, on foreign assistance in general, as somebody who imposed conditionalities and taught how to deal with conditionalities, I like conditionalities. I think that it concentrates our efforts, it gives us measurable indicators, we judge ourselves, and floating conditionalities, meaning those conditionalities that are not time-bound, because if something is time-bound, both people start making excuses. But floating is when you fulfill the conditions. So support, on-budget support for the Afghan government, we want to tie to conditions of reform. And because reforms are what the people of this country demand. And there is no contradiction between the demand of the ordinary Afghan men and women for effectiveness, transparency, and efficiency, and the international discourse. This is fully aligned. So as the servant of those people, I like to have benchmarks, conditions, and I think this is important because any program of action must have those type of indicators. With those, I think we can move forward. But let me again conclude. Our soldiers, so I come back to Wall Street. Please do go and review the operation in Helmand. They are doing what had not been done in the last 8 years. The Afghan soldier is a volunteer. He is not a conscript. The sheaths are too small, but I was very pleased to see officers graduate last week, and we had a very good group of Afghan women. Incidentally, there will be 4 women in the cabinet, so please, I will be fulfilling my my promise that there will be 4. I'm very proud of that. But again, gender relations are not a day's story. We're going to have a significant number of women named to ambassadorial posts. We're seriously looking at appointing women as governors, more than one. And at the deputy minister level, there will be serious attention. We've also created twinning arrangements with a number of countries where senior women will go to be trained for future jobs. Lack of systematic attention to positions of leadership and management is a common thread. Succession planning has not been in place. And what I'd like to leave as my legacy is a serious succession effort from day one, so that from president downward, there would be a fairly significant number of people available to run this country.
Just to follow up, of course you say that the decision on numbers is up to the American government and the American people, and that you can lay out the conditions. But I think if we know anything about you, is that you're a man who plans carefully and has ideas. Surely you know what the needs of the Afghan security forces are. Could you prioritize those, the top 3 needs that would be?
No, I will not.
Yes, President. I'm with the New York Times. In reviewing 100 peace processes from around the world, could you tell us a bit about what you've learned from them and which peace process you would like to model yours on?
First, the unfortunate fact is that 50% of peace agreements break down within 5 years. So it requires immense care. Signing the paper is not the outcome. Second, a peace agreement normally resulting in genuine movement towards peace brings 1% additional rate of growth to the neighborhood. So the peace dividend in terms of the neighborhood is very high. And when you think that post-2008, at least 20 million people have gone below poverty to Pakistan. The implications of this are quite significant. 3, peace, unfortunately, immediately does not bring security dividend. It brings an end to political legitimation of use of violence, but ordinary level security does not immediately improve. The population banks on it, but it does not see it. As the UN peace negotiators were putting together wonderful deals, IMF and the World Bank were demanding structural adjustment and cutting of budgets. So job issues are really significant. For us, one of the most significant things the thing that keeps me literally awake at night is that we'll have to absorb 5 million refugees after reaching peace. Without that sort of attempt, it's really significant. Now, on to the format. I've explained in 2 articles, including one that I wrote on Syria that came out in Foreign Policy and was also published by Legatum. So I don't want to go there. But to the process, there are 2 ways of negotiating, to stylize it. One is that you build up consensus. And second is you get bogged down in the most difficult issues and you don't make progress. So it is really important to have a full understanding to be able to reach movement. The 1990s peace agreements were product of very long periods. Up to 5 years were spent on negotiations. The kind of context that we deal with, 5 years. So in those areas, one should not repeat. One should be able to find other ways to speed up the process. And the type of teams that are required are teams that are going to understand establish mutual understanding, so that they can appreciate, look at the things. And there, one of the most important things is to have a classification of the issues, so that one can park an issue instead of get bogged down on it. I mean, there isn't a peace agreement that I've looked at that does not acquire a legal framework. There isn't a peace agreement that does not have a section on dealing with ex-combatants. There isn't a peace agreement that does not have sections on the functioning of security institutions, etc. So, there are things that are repetitive. The challenge and the difference between success and failure is that in the successful ones, the issues are carefully articulated, action plans are arrived at, and dealt with. Then almost every insurgence, every conflict is dependent on sanctuary. So end of a lot of, if you look at the Central American, Latin American conflicts, it came when the region seriously got involved. When there was an individualized efforts or UN mediation, things were very slow. But when the region reached a consensus, it changed the dynamic very considerably. So we've drawn lessons from these, and the very last point is strategic patience. You have to know the goal, and you have to really stay with it. And in making the public stay with it is, of course, a fundamental issue. And in the context of 1990s, the media was not a daily occurrence, a daily reality and hourly reality. Now, to think that one can negotiate covertly and things will stay covert, I think it's an impossibility. And again, in an open society like ours, that is diverse, that has different views, yet reaches consensus to our own distinctive ways, it needs staying with it, but staying in a manner that we understand the public pulse and deal with it. So as I said, it is challenging, but if it were not challenging, we would not be using force and killing each other. So to substitute that, in any child's future life is worth all the strategic patience that is required, and we must come with this, because otherwise, with the other threats, the ecology of terror that I've outlined to you, we would be condemned to continuous use of force, and we do want to come out of this. Thank you.